If you're somebody who's familiar with the doll industry, you probably know that there are hundreds of brands out there, from the classic Barbie to more complicated dolls like Rainbow High. There's a doll for every type of person with every type of aesthetic. Today, we'll be talking about my favorite doll line, one with a lengthy history of embracing its weirdness, Monster High. Before we actually get to talking about these dolls, there's a few concepts surrounding other doll brands that we have to discuss first. Nowadays, we consider Barbie as having a squeaky clean image, but at some point in time, parents felt she was too seductive looking for a kid to play with. This later resulted in a redesign for her in the 60s that made her a little less busty and brought her hips in by a little. Another criticism of early Barbie dolls was that she was kinda just a pretty face with no real story, until around the 80s, when she'd get special variants for multiple occupations, such as a CEO or astronaut. This was always less of a complaint though, as a blank slate can usually help spur a child's imagination. Well into the 90s, as fashion changed in fairly drastic ways, more doll lines, alongside Barbie, chose to represent themselves as fashion dolls. A great example of this is Bratz dolls, who have outfits heavily inspired by pop culture trends of the late 90s and early 2000s. These dolls also saw heavy criticism for their stylized features, particularly their made-up faces and full lips, alongside their clothing styles. Something I'll reiterate when I do my Bratz video is that the dolls were deemed to be too mature, despite their target audience being teens and tweens, and the fact that Barbie, a blonde white woman with conventionally European features, was being dressed in the same way at the same time. In contrast, 3 of the 4 main Bratz girls were people of color, who were actually the pioneers of what we consider to be Y2K fashion today. Another matter often discussed in the doll community is male dolls. For the most part, Ken serves the purpose of being a malleable accessory to whatever story you played with your Barbie, with not a lot of story of his own in most cases. The same went for Bratz, as well as generally whatever other doll lines pursued creating male dolls. With these 3 issues in mind of body type, clothing, and male representation, we'll better understand the core theming of Monster High.
Something's lurking the halls of Monster High. Something killer. Something fierce.
Now we're fierce. Monster High.
Teen children of legendary monsters.
Frankie's electrifying, stitching with style. Clawdeen's killer boots, fantastic smile. Draculaura's vamping count fab and more. Laguna's true blue, fishnets galore. Clear to now, drip and go bling. Freaky, streaky, bangs, bangs. It's a monsterista thing.
Get your fashion freak on. Wicked style so good, it's scary. Monster High dolls, each sold separately.
Pitching and development for Monster High goes back as far as 2007. Created by former Mattel employee Garrett Sander, Monster High was brought to life as a passion project he'd always dreamt of heading up. Inspired by other projects he'd worked on, such as Winx and My Scene Barbie, Monster High dolls would be high schooler fashion dolls descended from monsters in pop culture, such as werewolves, Dracula, and Frankenstein's monster, all of which served as the parents for 3 of the first prototype dolls, Howling Wolf, Eula D, and Frankenstein. A 4th trademark for Operetta was filed, but she didn't get a prototype doll made at this time. The test dolls were more realistically proportioned and had more human skin tones. Down the line, as the prototypes were tested with a target range of 8 to 12-year-old girls, they would actually give the feedback that they weren't monstrous enough, and when presented with the suggestion that Frankie be more green and Frankensteinish in color, something Garrett Sander had wanted from the very beginning, they agreed. When the dolls did finally hit the shelves in 2010, Frankie now sported a pale green skin tone, and Eula D, now renamed to Draculaura, had a pale pink skin tone. Howleen, renamed to Clawdeen, had a bit darker brown of a skin tone and otherwise saw most of her changes in her hair and clothing. The finalized dolls also used a very different mold from the prototypes, with bigger heads, smaller bodies, and skinnier limbs. These dolls were scary to parents for pretty much all the wrong reasons. For one, their skinny, stereotypically perfect bodies were worried to send the wrong message to girls about their own. Another issue parents had was the way they were dressed, with tall heels, spikes, studs, short skirts, devil wear. Moms tore the dolls apart for their slutty, skanky get-ups, some even going as far as calling them hooker dolls. As someone who actually had these dolls, trust me, I wasn't looking at them and wishing I looked like them, or thinking that I was anything less compared to them. I do think body inclusivity is very important to implement in doll lines. I also think these body designs were chosen to try to avoid the dolls being sexualized if they had more Barbie-like builds. During this time, it was a constant battle in doll design to choose the lesser of 2 evils. So in Monster High's case, they chose skinnier, less realistic body molds so they could dress them in what was considered a taboo way. Doll brands across the board have recently begun to sell more diverse dolls, which is the same case for Monster High, but we'll get to that later on. Otherwise, parents feared their daughters would want to dress the same way, in a way they saw was sexual, despite the fact that most clothing isn't inherently sexual, and that the characters who were minors themselves never did make any sexual remarks about their own styles or other style. Besides Frankie, draculaura, and Clawdeen, 2 other dolls were sold as part of the main 5 girls: Cleo Denial, the daughter of a mummy, and Laguna Blue, the daughter of a sea monster. You could buy one of the girls on their own for $17 then, which would be about $23 now. A 6th girl, or ghoul as the brand would classify them, was also released in that year, and is considered to be a 6th main character as she is in the web series and 3D CGI movies. Her name is Ghoulia Yelps, the daughter of a zombie. Monster High attendees also included male characters, or mansters. Unlike other doll lines, mansters would get stronger stories, with some of them being the canonical boyfriends of other characters, or in Claude Wolf's case, being the brother of Clawdeen as well as Draculaura's boyfriend. Except Claude, other mansters released as dolls in 2010 included Deuce Gorgon, the son of Medusa and Cleo's boyfriend, as well as Jackson Jekyll, the son of Dr. Jekyll, whose alter ego is Holt Hyde, the same way as Mr. Hyde is Dr. Jekyll's alter ego. In some media, like certain movies and the web series, he is suggested to be Frankie's love interest, but given that Frankie is the main character of G1, her love interests are basically fluid and change frequently. Claude would finally get a doll in 2011, and besides him, a few more characters would receive dolls within the year. This included the ghouls Abby Abominable, the daughter of a Yeti, C.A. Cupid, who isn't related to Cupid by blood, but was rather adopted into the Cupid family, Spectra Vondergeist, a ghost, and Toralei Stripe, the daughter of a werecat. The only other manster released in 2011 was Gil Weber, the son of a river monster and Laguna's boyfriend. Each year brought new CGI movies, which had become Mattel's main device in introducing new characters. It wasn't always a promise that new characters would get dolls right away, if at all. Ghoul dolls made available in 2012 included Howleen Wolf, Clawdeen's sister, Meowlody and Persephone, twin sisters and the daughters of a werecat, Nephra Denial, Cleo's sister, Operetta, the daughter of the Phantom of the Opera, who you may have noticed was one of the first ghouls to be trademarked, Rochelle Goyle, a gargoyle, Genefire Long, a dragon, Rebecca Steam, a robot, Scara Screams, a banshee, Skeleta Calaveras, a skeleton, and Venus McFlytrap, a plant monster. The only mansters released in 2012 were Hoodooed Voodoo, a living voodoo doll, and Invisibility, the invisible boy. In 2013, we got dolls for Headmistress Bloodgood, who is the school's principal, based off the Headless Horseman. We also got Katrine Demieux, a werecat, Gigi Grant and her sister Ginny, both genies, Caddy Noir, another werecat and a singer, Claudia Wolf, Claudeen's oldest sibling, Elizabeth, a vampire, Honey Swamp, a swamp monster, Jane Boolittle, a jungle monster, Viperine Gorgon, Deuce's older sister, and Wedona Spider, a spider and the daughter of Arachne from Greek mythology. We also only got one manster this year, Heath Burns, a fire elemental and probably the most powerful manster because of this. 2014 brought the most dolls. As for ghouls, we got Avia Trotter, the daughter of both a harpy and a centaur, Bonita Femur, the daughter of a skeleton and a moth, Cyrena Von Boo, the daughter of a mermaid and a ghost, Casta Fierce, a witch, and the daughter of the Greek goddess Circe, Gilda Goldstag, a Serenian hind, I don't know what that is, I'd love to learn more about that though, Iris Klops, a cyclops, Kiyomi Haunterly, the daughter of a Japanese faceless ghost, Lorna McNessie, the daughter of the Loch Ness Monster, Marisol Kohi, daughter of a South American variant of a Bigfoot-like creature, the Marikohi, I think I'm saying that right, I'm not sure, River Styx, a reaper, and Vandala Doubloons, the daughter of a pirate ghost. This was a good year for mansters too. We got 4 this year. We got dolls for Nathan Rott, the son of a zombie and a unicorn, Manny Tor, the son of a minotaur, Porter Geist, a ghost, and Garrett Duroc, a gargoyle. 2015 saw releases for Amanita Nightshade, a plant monster, Batsy Claro, daughter of the white vampire bat, EC Dawn Dancer, a deer spirit, Kirsty Trollston, the daughter of 2 trolls, Astronova, an alien, LED, a robot more futuristic in appearance and behavior than Rebecca, Guliope Jellington, the daughter of an unknown monster, most likely a slime creature, Calamari, a kraken, Perry and Pearl Serpentine, daughters of the Hydra, meaning there are 2 heads on one mermaid body, Luna Matthews, the daughter of the Mothman, and Mercedes King, daughter of the Rat King. The 2 manster dolls released this year were Finnegan Wake, the son of a mermaid, and Kieran Valentine, a vampire. There's actually a good chance that Kieran was released earlier because he's an older character, but the particular information I found said 2015. Things started to slow down by 2016 as only 4 ghouls were released. Dana Treasure Jones, the daughter of Davy Jones, Monica Decay, a zombie, Posea Reef, the daughter of Poseidon, and Sylvie Timberwolf, a silver-colored werewolf. 2017 produced 4 final ghouls, Beatrice the Bee, Lumina the Firefly, and Wingrid the Dragonfly, as well as Teresa Thornwillow, the daughter of a tree nymph. There were also a bunch of pets and parent dolls and little sibling dolls that I don't have the patience to talk about, so if you're really interested in seeing these dolls and all the variations the main dolls got, I'll link a collector's list in the description. Somewhere between 2016 and 2018, a soft reboot was pushed where the main ghouls got slight redesigns, nothing too drastic. These designs made it onto the shelf and into some animated content, but the brand had been slowing down for a few years by then, and with the series Ever After High, that was somewhat of a spin-off, not doing as well, everything related to Monster High was pretty quietly cancelled. The doll line had served its purpose, teaching girls that your differences are what make you unique, that you're better for having differences at all. Despite the delivery of this being questionable, the message was still an admirable one. Little kids were able to see themselves in these dolls, as many of them came from different backgrounds and perspectives. For example, the line's way of discussing racism came in the form of Gil's parents having a prejudice towards Laguna for being a saltwater sea monster. I'm not saying that watering down and creating allegories for racism is the answer in all cases, but for the time, the fact they even worked it in to teach kids how to recognize prejudices really makes sense given the brand's theme of being different. While many ghouls in the series did have a lot of their focus on love, characters like Abby and Clawdeen didn't express an interest in love nearly as directly or frequently as other characters, giving kids someone to relate to if they felt the same way. Even on less obvious levels, there were special characters for kids, with Ghoulia only being able to communicate through groans and other similar noises, but also with the other characters being able to understand her and get along with her. A lot of nonverbal kids related to her on a deeper level. This doesn't mean that the series was without its missteps, though. At one time in Clawdeen's biography, she mentioned having to shave an excessive amount in order to stay well kept, and presumably to appear more attractive to boys, which at the time did make up more of her character. While I'm sure the line was a throwaway, a joke about how hairy werewolves can get, it was still in bad taste, considering that Monster High was about becoming comfortable with your differences. The brand also faced backlash for stereotypical elements in certain characters like Skelita, who is Mexican, and Isi, who is indigenous. Most of these stereotypes came across in their design choices. Cleo was also criticized for the way she was portrayed, that despite being Egyptian, she didn't have Egyptian facial features in particular. Regardless of whether or not any content was being released, the Monster High fandom thrived. The kids who had grown up with the dolls had grown out of them, but they'd remained in the memories and hearts of many. Due to this, the kids who had both matured and still maintained a good relationship with the series were able to see both the brand's strengths and weaknesses. Fans suggested simple changes in diversity and narrative both before Generation 2 and during, which would become long-held opinions for many individuals, including myself. When rumors began to circulate that a second reboot was in the works for Monster High, fans were excited to see just how more freaky fabulous the series could get in a 2020s lens. Well, freaky is one way to put what we ended up getting. From the earliest rumors in 2020 to official news in 2021, the overall goal for Mattel was to make Monster High more diverse, between new dolls, a new TV series, and even a live-action movie. All of this seemed like very promising news until we began to get more official details and leaks. One positive was that they did give the characters more diverse body types, and even more diverse personalities and backgrounds. However, they also made decisions to drastically alter the previous canon of multiple characters, some in harmful ways. I don't know a much better way to really point everything out other than to go through the characters who have been detailed upon as of 2022, as well as talking about the movie, which is a whole other problem. Instead of Frankie being the focus ghoul in this reboot, it's Clawdeen, which I actually really like. But something that a few people have pointed out is that she was rewritten to be mixed, the child of a werewolf and a human. This gave Mattel the opportunity to lighten Clawdeen's skin tone by a fair amount, despite years-long backlash about the inconsistency of her skin tone between her official art, the web series and movies, and merchandise. It even raised the question of which decision came first, to make her the lead or make her mixed race, suggesting that Mattel was just hesitant to give the lead to a darker-skinned character. Frankie in this reboot is non-binary, which is actually something fans had suggested and headcanoned for years. Other than this, they retain most of their previous characteristics, coming across as young and naive, but otherwise very intelligent. They also have a prosthetic leg, another of most fans' personal headcanons for them. Overall, I would say that Mattel did the best job with them in this reboot. They absolutely decimated Draculaura. Visually, they gave her a very cute design, making her one of the more plus-size characters, if you can call that very plus-size, but regardless, bigger than Gen 1. Gen 1 Draculaura is known for her sweet, bubbly attitude, and her tendency to treat everyone she comes across as warmly as possible. What they did in the reboot was make her cold and slow to open up. In the movie, she's mean to Clawdeen and Frankie at first, before becoming friendly with them, but even then, she's a little snarky to other characters. As someone who physically looks a little more like this Draculaura, but kins Gen 1 Draculaura, it just confuses me why we couldn't have both. I know that the cutesy, sweet, plus-size girl trope might be a little overdone, but Draculaura was always more than that. I think making one of the more curvy characters a borderline mean girl who feels a lot of pressure on herself to fit a certain image sends a somewhat negative message, but I could be reading into that by too much. Another character they changed a lot was Laguna. She got a full head-to-toe redesign, making her pink instead of blue, with long, colorful hair, and more fishy features like more fins and sharp, monstrous teeth. Another little detail fans had asked for years. I think she looks really cute. Another big change they made regarded her race, having it that she grew up in Honduras rather than Australia. This is one of the more minor controversies, but still important nonetheless. Fans argue that changing a character with an already non-American background to another background is redundant, that more diversity could be created by having both characters with both backgrounds. I have to say I agree. Another thing they could have done was make Laguna an Australian indigenous, rather than having her just be Australian. I feel like doll lines have always had this problem with depicting indigenous peoples, whether that be from America or Australia or anywhere else. Cleo saw the least of a change, remaining the same as a person, somewhat of a bully and conceited, but able to mesh with the other ghouls. In the movie, this is less true, but honestly, I can't say that the movie matters as much. Her design implements less stereotypical Egyptian clothing, but her facial structure still remains mostly European looking. Deuce has upgraded from being a little bit of a pushover to being a little less of a pushover, with a deeper personality. Not to say Deuce didn't have one before, it's just made more apparent in a quicker fashion. The biggest change they made was writing it in that he'd broken up with Cleo prior to the events of the movie and rather has a crush on Clawdeen. This isn't necessarily a bad thing or controversial for any reason, just a little upsetting to fans who think a snake-based character is a better fit with the Cleopatra-based character, you know, for historical jokes. Heath just sucks. This is completely based on aesthetics, it's my personal opinion. He's exactly the same as he was as a person. He just looks bad. In the movie, he looks like an uglier designed Mo from the Doodlebobs. In the series, he's just very underdesigned, as most side characters in the series are. Speaking of side characters, Ghoulia was made into even more of a side character, which sucks to begin with, but the other big change they made to her was making her completely verbal, disappointing non-verbal fans who had attached themselves to her for this reason. I guess the reasoning was that the quote-unquote dumb-sounding zombie trope had gotten a little old, but the fact that she was special and different for her way of communicating was a major part of her character, and it sucks that it's not there anymore. The movie itself is a point of controversy, specifically for its director, Todd Holland. Previous to directing this movie, he was the director for Krippendorf's Tribe, a movie where white people pose as a previously undocumented indigenous tribe to pad the resume of the title anthropologist James Krippendorf. This movie is based off a book, but as a director, there are choices you can make to alter the narrative and flow of a story. The director could very well have cast indigenous people as James and his family, who could later pose as a tribe with respectfully realistic indigenous features and clothing. Instead, he had white people don full-body brown makeup and Halloween costume-esque tribal wear. So obviously, fans had their worries that watching the movie would pad the pockets of a horribly racist man. He also directed Malcolm in the Middle, so we were worried that the writing would be equally unfunny and uninteresting. The movie ended up rolling around and it just ended up kind of being mediocre. If you really want to watch the movie, I'd recommend becoming Captain Jack Sparrow to watch it, if you get what I mean. Todd Holland does not deserve any more money, but unfortunately, Nickelodeon has an awful track record for hiring terrible people as directors. As for the series, it's still slowly airing on Nickelodeon while I'm writing this, and I don't watch it, so I only know a few things from what I read online, so I only have a few things to say about it. For one, Jackson no longer exists in the canon. It's just Monster High's best manster, gone. Mad about that. Abby's also suffered a little, seeing an extreme downgrade in her design. She no longer even comes across as a Yeti, with no fur in her design whatsoever. They also dropped her underbite, a design aspect that a lot of people actually enjoyed. And even after years of fans campaigning for Abby to have facial hair in a Yeti-like manner, this suggestion clearly fell on deaf ears. The bigger complaint I've seen about the series is that the characters dress terribly. in that 2010 tween live-action Nick show character way, you get it. It's kinda clear that there's less of an emphasis on fashion, more on the message of embracing your differences, which isn't a bad thing, but they could've had both. Right now, nobody can really say how well the new generation is doing. Mattel is supporting the Monster High brand by selling Gen 1 collectors and reproduction dolls, presumably as a cushion for lost money if Gen 3 fails. Old fans are sort of at odds with the new generation, but it kind of looks like younger kids are enjoying it. What I think is that we can have both peacefully. Gen 3 doesn't erase Gen 1, and while Gen 3 has big issues, it solved most of the ones that Gen 1 had. I still love Monster High, I always will, because it taught me that, yeah, I'm different, but that makes me special. It makes me me. Hello, I just wanted to say thank you for watching the video. The support has been great. I could talk more about the movie. I think in the future I will talk about the movies on their own. I would have mentioned it in this one, but it was already getting to be long, and I was I was looking forward to writing the next script. Like, I write all my scripts by hand, so I have to finish up the one I'm doing to get to the next one. So that's kind of my motivation for getting scripts done, is like, oh, I get to this script if I finish this one. So I also wanted to mention in a video itself, I know I made a post about this, but I have linked an email in my channel description where you can submit fan art and stuff. I got a piece of fan art that I showed at the beginning of the video. So if you ever want to submit fan art, or if you've drawn fan art and just don't have a way to get it to me, there you go. This is also a place that you can submit questions or like comments, whatever. Or if you ever have any leads on lost media stuff I've mentioned, that's great too. You can put that in there. But anyway, thank you so much for watching the video, and I'll see you in the next one.